Hey guys, tonight we drift into the smoky twilight of a long-forgotten Viking camp tucked somewhere between myth and morning breath. The fire crackles low, sending ribbons of wood smoke into a dusky sky streaked with northern lights. You can hear it, the low murmur of mead-soaked conversation, the occasional clank of iron, the scrape of leather boots over frostbitten dirt. You draw your cloak tighter. You've wandered into the heart of a culture famed for raiding monasteries and exploring icy seas, and now apparently for dental hygiene. Because the man sitting across from you, face half lit by firelight, just smiled. And his teeth, they're shockingly clean, not gleaming like a modern toothpaste commercial, sure, but no black rot, no dangling molar, no cavernous pit of decay. Just straight, healthy-looking chompers flashing in a grin as he gnaws through dried fish. You were expecting something more grim. This is confusing. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, comment your location and local time. I love knowing where and when you're drifting off with me. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't belong here, obviously. You've got a toothbrush back home. These people have axes and animal pelts. But still, as you watch one Viking after another open their mouths to talk, laugh, or threaten a neighbor with decapitation, you can't help noticing their teeth are surprisingly well maintained. Not pristine, let's not get carried away, but definitely not the rotting stumps you expected from a people who spent a lot of time pillaging and very little time in dental school. The camp is in full swing. You pass a group of warriors comparing scars. One of them mid-story picks at his teeth with a carved sliver of bone. It's a toothpick, you realize. A Viking toothpick, and he's using it like it's the most natural thing in the world. Later, you'll see another one using what looks suspiciously like a small stick to clean between his molars. Turns out oral hygiene wasn't just a happy accident, it was part of the culture. You settle beside the fire and try not to stare, as one of the women, young with intricate braids and a tattoo curling around her jaw, spits a glob of chewed birch bark into the flames. She's been chewing it for a while, you realize. It's not just for fun. Birch bark has antimicrobial properties. The Vikings didn't know what that meant in modern scientific terms, of course, but they knew. Their mouths felt cleaner when they used it. Historians still argue whether it was tradition, instinct, or simple trial and error that kept their teeth so resilient. Your modern brain is protesting. These were warriors, right? Rowing across oceans, cutting off heads, drinking from skulls. Not exactly the poster children for preventive dentistry, but archaeologists keep finding Viking skulls, with teeth intact, no widespread signs of decay, cavities, or tooth loss even into old age. Sure, there are some damaged or worn teeth, but that's more from gnawing on tough meat and grainy bread than poor hygiene. You'd be shocked how many of them died with full smiles. And speaking of bread, there's a whole subplot there. Their bread was different from ours. Made with stone-ground flour, it often included coarse grains and lacked modern sugar. That meant less plaque, fewer acid-producing bacteria, and a diet that, oddly enough, was kind of tooth-friendly. Of course, their dental health didn't come without a price. You spot a warrior at the edge of the camp leaning against a wooden pole. He's holding his jaw. His expression says it all. He's in pain. Not every Viking got out cavity-free. There were infections, abscesses, and impromptu extractions. Viking healers, yes, they existed, used a mix of herbs, poultices, and even fish oil to treat oral issues. Whether it worked is debatable, but they tried. And here's the thing that keeps humming in your head as you drift further into this smoky, slightly fermented dream world. They cared. They cared about their teeth. Enough to chew bark-carved picks and carry around little hygiene kits, often found buried alongside their owners. A man might go to Valhalla with his sword in one hand and his tooth-cleaning tools in the other. Maybe not literally, but close enough to raise eyebrows. You probably won't survive this. Not because of the axes or the mead or the distinct possibility you're hallucinating this entire evening, but because the image of a Viking flossing with sinew might be too much for your modern sensibilities. Still, you're here. The fire crackles. Someone is softly singing a song in Old Norse. And as the camp begins to quiet down for the night, you realize the biggest shock of all. In this brutal, wind-battered world of blood feuds and glory, a clean smile was more than vanity. It was status, it was strength, and it might have just been the thing that helped a Viking keep going. You shift on the rough blanket, half wrapped in a bearskin someone tossed your way. Tomorrow you'll follow them on the trail, maybe out to sea, maybe to raid a monastery, maybe just to see what else they cleaned with birch sap. But tonight you rest. The stars wheel slowly above, and a Viking beside you is brushing his teeth with what looks like a bundle of roots. You close your eyes and the fire warms your face. You wake up to a low, rhythmic scraping sound. It's not threatening, more like someone whittling wood or maybe sharpening a knife. As you lift your head from the fur-covered ground, the fire has burned down to embers. The morning air smells like pine smoke, sweat, and something vaguely minty. You turn and see him, same warrior from last night, still seated near the fire, but now crouched over a piece of bone. No, wait, it's not bone, it's a sliver of antler, maybe elk. And what he's doing isn't random carving. He's shaping it into a long, thin pick with a narrowed end. A dental tool, a Viking toothpick. He's making it by hand, whittled down, with the same care someone today might reserve for carving a chess piece. This wasn't a hobby. This was hygiene. Toothpicks of Thor, you think. The Norse gods may have been all about thunder, trickery, and battle, but their mortal followers had some surprisingly meticulous habits, especially for people known for chopping heads off with reckless joy. In fact, archaeologists have uncovered dozens of Viking toothpicks at burial sites, often found tucked among beads, combs, and grooming tools. Grooming tools. Not exactly what you'd expect beside a battle axe, but the Vikings had a soft spot for staying clean, or at least cleaner than their medieval neighbors. Historians still argue whether this obsession with grooming was driven by health, vanity, or both. But there's no denying that the toothpick, often made from birch bone or metal, was a staple. Some even had decorative carvings. One that surfaced in Denmark had tiny runes etched into the shaft. You can imagine some warrior casually picking his teeth while reciting a prayer to Odin, or muttering about the afterlife, or just wondering what was stuck in his molar. You wander the camp slowly, and now that you're looking for it, the clues are everywhere. A woman sharpens a twig to a point, tests it on her teeth, and tosses it aside. A boy chews on the end of a feather, rolling it around his mouth with the kind of idle focus kids today give chewing gum. You're starting to suspect the Vikings were far ahead of their time in the oral fixation department. There's even a pouch carefully tied with sinew sitting near a warrior's gear. You peek inside discreetly because you know survival. Inside are small carved implements, a tiny pot of what smells like mint and ashes, and a dried root you don't recognize. Not exactly Crester, but hey, it gets the job done. To be fair, they didn't have modern toothbrushes or fluoride or dental insurance, but they weren't exactly savages in the oral care department. Some even used feather quills to clean between teeth. Sounds weird, it is, but not that different from flossing with thread. The technique may be old, but the logic is timeless. There's a story that once made the rounds unconfirmed, like most great Viking tales, about a berserker who cleaned his teeth with a splinter of oak before every raid. Not for superstition, but because he believed it removed bad blood from the mouth, whatever that meant. Maybe it was metaphor. Maybe he just hated morning breath. Who knows? The Vikings didn't exactly keep dental journals. The man with the antler pick stands and stretches. You catch a glimpse of his mouth as he yawns clean, healthy, only a little staining from the dark ale they drink like water. You follow him toward a stream. It's a short walk through the woods filled with the sound of birds you don't recognize and the wind whispering through pine. When you reach the water, he kneels and rinses out his mouth, swishing and spitting. He does this twice, maybe 3 times before standing and heading back without a word. The practice of mouth rinsing wasn't universal, but it wasn't rare either. Some Viking texts, what little exists, refer to mouthwater as part of morning rituals. Whether it was to honor the gods, wake up the body, or just avoid offending your bunkmate with bad breath, it stuck, and it worked. For the most part, Viking remains show healthy gums, low plaque buildup, and minimal signs of advanced dental disease. Not because they had better genes, but because they had fewer processed foods, chewed more naturally abrasive materials, and yes, used toothpicks like tiny Nordic ninjas. You crouch by the stream, splashing your face, wondering if a birch twig would actually help your modern-day coffee-stained smile. Probably not, but there's something satisfying about it, this raw, unfiltered approach to health. No branding, no floss ads, just simple tools and centuries of trial and error. One of the younger warriors walks past and gives you a nod. His smile is missing a tooth, not from decay, but likely from battle. It's oddly comforting. Not every Viking had a perfect mouth, but they made an effort, a real one. And that's the surprising truth, buried beneath centuries of stereotypes and cinematic grime. The Vikings weren't just berserkers and plunderers. They were also careful, observant, and maybe a little vain. You start to understand why grooming kits show up so frequently in Viking graves. They didn't want to meet Odin with spinach in their teeth. You trail behind the group, heading back to camp, the sun now brushing the treetops with gold. The morning is alive with motion, smoke rising again. Warriors packing supplies, a woman boiling herbs in a stone pot. You catch the scent of juniper and mint. Someone's making dental rinse or soup. Hard to say. You pass a wooden post etched with runes, and though you can't read them, you feel a kind of reverence. Maybe it's a marker for a grave. Maybe it's a warning, or maybe, just maybe, it's the Viking version of a dental hygiene PSA. As you sit back by the fire warming your fingers, you take one last glance at the now sharpened toothpick the warrior left behind. Practical, personal, intimate. In a world that worshipped strength and valor, it was these little habits, the quiet morning rituals, the bone-carved tools, that told the real story. And somewhere far off in the mists of time, Thor probably approves. You spend the next day trudging along a muddy path between fir trees and frozen puddles, following a small hunting party. They move with purpose, quiet, quick, but not rushed. They're headed to trap something, maybe elk, maybe boar. You, on the other hand, are mostly here for the conversation, or more specifically, the teeth. It hits you again as you watch them chew dried berries and talk in low tones. None of them seem to be suffering from toothaches, swollen faces, or the kind of grimaces that usually accompany 10th century dentistry. You expected to see toothless warriors gritting through pain with blackened gums and a 1,000-yard stare. Instead, you've got straight-backed men and women gnawing through jerky like it's no big deal. You start to notice something else too, the food. It's rough, sure. There's no fondue or five-course feasts. But there's also no sugar. Not the refined kind. Just dried fruits, fresh meats, root vegetables, and heavy breads made from stone-ground grain. And when we say stone-ground, we mean really stone-ground. Grit from the millstones often got into the flour, acting like built-in toothpaste. Crunchy, yes, but abrasive in a way that scraped plaque away as they ate. Historians still argue whether the average Viking's low-sugar, high-fiber, high-chew diet was the main reason their teeth stayed in decent shape. But the evidence is hard to ignore. Without refined sugars, those evil little cavity gremlins, there's far less acid erosion. And less acid, less decay. It's kind of beautiful in a crunchy, oat-cakey sort of way. Of course, there are downsides. You've probably noticed that the Vikings weren't exactly boiling their water or baking with baking soda. Their bread was dense, heavy, and filled with particles that wore down enamel over time. Many Viking skulls show signs of worn teeth, flattened molars ground down from a lifetime of chewing hard foods. But wear and tear is very different from rot and decay. And that's the weird paradox. Modern humans with soft bread and sugary snacks often have more cavities by age 20 than a Viking might have had by death. You think of your last trip to the dentist. All that fluoride and floss and still maybe one too many fillings. It's humbling. You stop near a clearing where one of the women has pulled out a leather pouch. She opens it with a flick and reveals dried leaves and something black charcoal. Not just for the fire, apparently. She crushes a bit between her fingers, mixes it with spit, and starts to rub it along her gums. You try not to stare, but she catches your gaze and smirks. You get the sense she knows exactly what she's doing. Charcoal has been used for centuries to clean teeth, absorb toxins, and act as a kind of ancient mouthwash. And the Vikings. They were early adopters. Sure, they didn't have Instagram reels showing before and after shots, but they understood that certain substances could polish and cleanse the mouth. It's messy. Black smudges over her lips. But when she rinses her mouth out with water from a goatskin flask, her teeth once again don't look half bad. You lean against a tree and watch. The rest of the group settles in for a break, and out come more twigs, more bark, more bone picks. One guy chews on a root like it owes him money. Another pulls what looks like a feather from behind his ear and flicks it between his teeth like a magician's prop. This is not an exception. This is routine. You remember something you read once, how dental pain was one of the worst chronic issues in pre-modern societies. In some cultures, it was practically a death sentence, but not here. Not really. It wasn't perfect. Plenty of skeletons show signs of infection and abscess. But overall, the rate of severe dental decay in Viking remains is remarkably low. You wonder what would happen if you handed them a Mars bar. Would it be love at first bite? Or would they instinctively know it was bad news? You picture a Viking spitting it out like poison. Too soft, too sweet, too weird. There's a soft crack from the trees. One of the hunters perks up. You all go still. A moment passes, then silence again. False alarm. But your heart is still thudding, partly from the tension and partly from the surreal realization that you're watching ancient Scandinavians casually outpace modern humans in oral health. You break off a piece of birch bark from a nearby tree. Just to try. You chew it slowly. It tastes like winter and medicine and wood. Not pleasant, not awful, and strangely refreshing. It leaves your mouth feeling cleaner. Maybe it's placebo, maybe not. There's something undeniably tactile and grounded about these Viking methods. No plastic packaging, no minty blue gel, just the forest, your hands, and a few sharp tools. It's not minimalist, it's primal. A soft snow begins to fall, coating the edges of your cloak. You walk with the others back toward camp, listening to the crunch beneath your boots and the low murmur of conversation. Someone behind you sneezes, someone ahead laughs, and the woman with the charcoal smiles again just to prove a point you suspect. The day ends with you back at the fire, watching flames dance against the dark. You realize that for all their brutality, the Vikings had routines, structure, cleanliness even. And part of that structure involved taking care of their teeth, not perfectly, but purposefully. There's something to be said for that. You wrap the fur tighter around your shoulders and feel your jaw relax. Your mouth oddly feels fresher. Not from fluoride, but from the knowledge that sometimes chewing on a stick in the snow can be more effective than a $300 electric toothbrush gathering dust on your bathroom counter. Sleep doesn't come quickly, but it comes honestly. The next morning breaks cold and pale with frost limbing every edge of the camp. You stretch under the weight of furs and notice how the Vikings are already moving. Early risers, these people, though. Maybe it's easier to wake up when your pillow is a pine log and the wind is trying to chisel its way through your tent flap. As you emerge into the half-light, you hear something rhythmic, almost musical, a scraping sound, steady and deliberate. You follow it past the breakfast preparation, smoked fish, flatbread, steaming mugs of something earthy, and find a man sitting on a stone, hunched over a length of sinew. He pulls it taut, threads it through something between his teeth, and then yanks, gently. He's flossing. Not in the way you might at home, with cinnamon-flavored ribbon pulled from a mint-green plastic box. No. This is Viking floss animal sinew, likely from a deer or elk, scraped and stretched into a cord. And he's using it like a pro, with no grimace or hesitation, just muscle memory and a quiet sense of duty. Iron Age interdental floss. Let that sink in. You sit beside him, pretending to tie your boots, while watching out of the corner of your eye. He finishes and rinses his mouth with a splash of cold water, then wipes his lips on his sleeve like it's the most mundane part of his morning routine. It probably is. And as he walks away, you spot a little pouch tied to his belt. Not for coins, not for weapons, but filled with grooming items, a comb, a sliver of soap, a pick, and that sinew cord. You'd think a Viking warrior's belt would be weighed down with tools of destruction. Instead, it holds a hygiene kit that wouldn't look out of place in a medieval wellness influencer's travel bag. Historians still debate how widespread this practice was. Was it limited to the elite, to warriors, to those with enough leisure to care about appearance, or was it just normal? Part of being civilized by Viking standards. The evidence is scattered but compelling. Personal grooming tools have been found across a wide range of burial sites. Men and women, rich and poor, warriors and farmers. And the combs, oh the combs. The Vikings adored them. Made of bone or antler, finely carved, often decorated. More combs have been found in Viking graves than weapons. That's not a joke, that's archaeology. As you warm your hands over the morning fire, a young woman joins you, brushing her hair methodically. She has bright eyes, a weathered face, and a small stick tucked behind one ear. Her version of a travel toothbrush, probably. She glances at your mouth, then offers you a strip of bark with a sly grin. It smells like licorice. It's from the sweet flag plant Acorus calamus, used as a breath freshener, painkiller, and in some places, an early attempt at dental anesthetic. It numbs the tongue slightly, leaves a pleasant tingle. You chew it hesitantly and feel your taste buds light up. The Vikings weren't just scraping away plaque, they were flavoring their mouths like apothecary chefs. And yet not all was perfect in this chilly dental paradise. Injuries happened, teeth got knocked out. Some skulls show signs of infection abscesses that likely caused swelling fever, even death. But there's one thing, most of those skulls also show intervention. Holes drilled into jawbones to release pressure. Marks that indicate teeth were pulled probably without anesthesia, but with surprising precision. Viking toothsmiths, if you will. Traveling healers who doubled as amateur dentists. You walk to the edge of camp thinking about that. The duality of it. These were people who could tear through a monastery with blades and fire, then sit down to clean between their teeth with a carved sliver of birch. Who could knock your molar out in battle, then hand you a root to numb the pain. It's almost poetic in a blood and bark sort of way. As you pass one of the longboats pulled up and half frozen on the shore, you notice a man hunched over a child checking her mouth. He tilts her chin, gently examines her teeth, then gives her a nod of approval. She beams literally and figuratively and dashes off. It's a small moment, easy to miss, but telling. Dental care wasn't just a warrior's concern. It was generational, cultural, passed down not just through tools, but through habit. A father teaching his daughter how to chew the right bark. A grandmother passing on her charcoal blend. A village healer grinding herbs to pack into an aching molar. The knowledge wasn't written down, but it was embedded like tartar on a tooth in the rhythms of their daily lives. You begin to realize this isn't surprising at all. It's logical. In a world where you might need to bite through sinew, chew dried meat for days, or scream war cries across a fjord, strong teeth weren't just cosmetic. They were functional, a necessity, and so they were cared for, not in the sterile clinical way we might think of today, but with a rugged tactile intimacy. You find yourself back at the stream again, rinsing your mouth like you've done it 100 times. The cold water bites your gums, but when you spit it out, your mouth feels alive. Not peppermint fresh, but clean, real. One of the warriors walks past and tosses you a twig. "Good one," he says in a thick accent. You nod like you know what that means. Probably a compliment. Probably. The day continues with hunting, trading, storytelling, and the endless small tasks that make up a Viking life. But you keep coming back to those threads of sinew, those bundles of bark, those delicate hand-carved picks. It wasn't luxury. It wasn't vanity. It was survival. And somewhere deep in the back of your modern brain, you begin to suspect that maybe your ancestors had it more figured out than you'd like to admit. Later that afternoon, as the clouds begin to roll in thick and heavy like wool soaked in iron, you take shelter inside one of the longhouses. It's warmer in here, lined with thick furs and heavy wood beams, the scent of peat smoke hanging in the air. A group of warriors are lounging on benches, passing around a horn of mead. Someone laughs. Someone snores. Someone's carving a bone figurine with practiced hands. And right in the middle of this rugged domestic scene, another curious tradition unfolds. One of the older men, a weathered skald with silver hair braided neatly at the sides, leans forward and begins to speak. It's a tale, of course, a saga, the kind passed down orally from one generation to the next, where heroes fight dragons and gods meddle with fate. But before he even utters the first line, he reaches into his tunic and pulls out a stick. It's not decorative. It's slightly frayed on one end. He puts it in his mouth, chews for a few seconds, then runs the fibers across his teeth with the lazy precision of someone who's done this every day for 50 years. It's a tooth-cleaning twig, again, and not a single person bats an eye. Scalds and smiles, that's what this moment is. A reminder that even the keepers of myth and legend valued oral hygiene. Not because it looked nice necessarily, but because a clear voice, a healthy mouth, a pain-free jaw. That's vital when your job is to talk for hours in dim candlelight, weaving the history of your people into stories long enough to outlast the embers in the hearth. You settle beside a post and listen. His voice rises and falls like the wind over the fjord. It's captivating, but your eyes keep flicking to the little twig in his hand. He's still using it occasionally between verses like punctuation, clean verse, clean mouth. Historians still argue whether these routines were symbolic, ritualistic, or purely practical. But it's hard to ignore the possibility that even storytelling, one of the most sacred Viking arts, was paired with a desire for a clean, healthy mouth. And there's something else here too. You notice the others listening, women, men, a boy no older than 12, all with similar tools tucked into belts, braids, or hanging from leather cords around their necks. The chewing twig was as common as a knife. And why wouldn't it be? With no toothpaste, no clinics, no toothbrushes, this was survival hygiene. Quick, portable, and wildly effective. The stick in question is likely from a tree like willow or birch, both known to have antiseptic properties. Modern science later confirmed what these people learned through centuries of lived experience. Chew the right stick and you get fresher breath, fewer infections, and fewer toothaches. Of course, it wasn't just about the stick. The Vikings were particular about what they ate and when. You glance toward the fire where a pot of stew is bubbling. It smells hearty meat, onion root, vegetables, no sugar, no sticky starches, no sweetened drinks unless you count mead, which is a topic for another section. This kind of diet doesn't cling to your teeth the way modern snacks do. That's the real story here. Not just the tools, but the lifestyle. You watch the skald finish his tale to quiet nods and a few claps. Then he leans back, sips from the mead horn, and finally slips his cleaning twig back into the folds of his robe. Mission accomplished, story told, mouth still functioning. You imagine a modern motivational speaker doing that, mid-keynote casually flossing with a root. Wouldn't fly. But here it's not rude, it's respectable. And the more time you spend here, the more you start to understand the logic of it all. In a society where every part of your body had to function, where you needed your voice, your jaw, your teeth, to fight, to eat, to speak, to survive, it made sense to care for them. You walk outside again into the fading afternoon. The clouds have thickened. Snowflakes drift like lazy stars. You're offered a piece of dried fish and accept. It's tough, really tough, like chewing through history. But it's clean, protein-packed, and again, no sugar. You finish with a swig of cold water, then try the birch twig a second time. It's growing on you. Your gums tingle. Your breath tastes like forest. Later, around the communal fire, someone tells another story. This one involves a man who bit through a gold coin on a bet and won. Supposedly his teeth were so strong that he cracked the metal, then cleaned out the pieces with a carved ivory pick. Was it real? Maybe. Maybe not. But the pick itself, that's real. Found in a burial mound near Uppsala. Smooth, polished, elegant, ivory bone or sometimes bronze. Viking dental tools weren't just practical. They were beautiful, embellished with runes, animal motifs, even little knots of knotwork. a reflection perhaps of how personal they were, how these weren't just tools, but companions in daily life. You hold the stick in your hand and realize it's becoming part of your rhythm too. Chew, scrape, rinse, not glamorous, but strangely comforting. As the fire dies down and the snow thickens outside, you realize something deeper. Oral hygiene wasn't a footnote in Viking culture. It was woven into everything: stories, meals, rituals, relationships. A smile wasn't just a flash of teeth. It was a sign of health, strength, and status. You yawn, jaw aching slightly from all the chewing, but your mouth feels clean. And in a longhouse full of warriors, poets, and farmers, all armed with nothing but sticks and bone, you feel strangely ready for what you don't know yet. But your teeth are prepped for it. Something went wrong. Please try reloading the conversation. By now, you're beginning to realize that Viking life, while often cold, chaotic, and brutal, also had its tender routines. And among those routines, surprisingly, were rites of passage involving teeth. Not just adult maintenance or warrior grooming, but rituals surrounding the tiniest, earliest teeth. Baby teeth. You're sitting in a side alcove of the longhouse when a young mother brings her child over to the hearth. The child is teething clearly, from the drool slick on his chin and the bark strip he's gnawing on with the fury of a miniature berserker. He has only 2 little teeth poking through like pale moons on his bottom gum, but everyone treats it like a milestone. A small gathering forms: elders, a midwife, and a skald, who begins murmuring a soft chant in Old Norse. You watch as the mother takes a thin strip of animal sinew, cleaned, dried, and looped, and ties it gently around a carved, tooth-shaped bead. She fastens it around the baby's wrist. The room falls still. This is a ritual, not just a cute accessory. It's a tan perla, a tooth pearl. Vikings believed that baby teeth held spiritual significance, representing strength, health, and protection from disease. When a child lost a tooth, it was often saved, sometimes carved into jewelry, or even offered in miniature ceremonies. Some beads were shaped like teeth to act as symbolic guardians for infants who hadn't yet begun teething. Historians still argue whether these practices were spiritual or simply symbolic, a comfort to families in a harsh, unpredictable world. But the presence of tooth-shaped artifacts in burial sites across Scandinavia suggests it wasn't rare. Some were found tucked inside cribs. Others were buried with children who hadn't lived long. A heartbreaking but poignant reminder of how much value the Vikings placed on the earliest signs of life. You lean back, watching the baby clench his jaw over a chunk of birch. The wood has been soaked in something, maybe honey, maybe an herbal tincture. It soothes the gums and offers some flavor, a small mercy for teething pain in a world with no Tylenol. The midwife offers you a glance and smiles knowingly. She holds up a small pouch made from deer hide. Inside are several little tokens, baby teeth, worn smooth from handling, each strung on a cord or bound in linen. These are keepsakes worn by mothers or hidden in the folds of bedding. Amulets of protection, perhaps, or simple remembrance. A few of the other children in the longhouse, ranging from toddlers to preteens, gather around the fire. One is missing his front teeth and proudly shows off the gap like a badge of honor. His father ruffles his hair and hands him a twig. You expect the kid to chew it idly, but no, he uses it precisely, brushing it across his gums, like he's been doing it since he could walk. Because he has. That's the point. Oral hygiene wasn't introduced later in life. It was taught from the start. Kids watch their parents chew bark, scrape their teeth, rinse with cold water, and do it all again the next day. No lectures, no sticker charts, just ritual and repetition, a rhythm of survival that began before you could talk. You begin to see the long game here. The Vikings understood that a healthy child had a better chance at becoming a strong adult. And strong adults didn't just need muscles or courage, they needed teeth. To eat, to speak, to fight, to sing. Teeth were tools like axes or boats or hammers. They were treated with respect. And so the children learned early. There's another layer to this that makes you pause. Some Viking sagas mention a warrior's first blood, not as a kill, but as the moment their baby teeth were lost. It was a marker of transformation, the beginning of strength, the shedding of soft, vulnerable parts, in exchange for something harder, more permanent. Imagine that. A culture where losing a baby tooth was your first rite of passage, where your family might keep that tooth as a talisman, a marker of your journey toward adulthood, where your mother might whisper a prayer over it before tying it to your belt for luck in battle. You think back to the baby with the tooth bead on his wrist. He's asleep now, mouth slightly open, gums pink and sore. And yet, even in this early state, he's part of something ancient, a thread that stretches from firelight and frost to your own mouth, your own rituals, your own toothbrush. Waiting back home, you never thought you'd feel emotional over baby teeth. But here you are in a drafty longhouse surrounded by fur and soot and stories, wondering what rituals you've forgotten, what tiny, meaningful habits your ancestors might have carried across centuries. The fire pops. A gust of wind howls outside. But inside the world is quiet. The skald begins another story, and one of the children, still clutching a bark strip, leans forward, mouth slightly agape, a new tooth just breaking through the gum line. You smile, imagining the bead that'll soon be tied around their wrist. Protection strength and a clean mouth. Seems like a solid start to life. It's late in the evening now, the kind of darkness that settles like a thick animal pelt across the land, heavy and unmoving. Inside the longhouse, the fire is down to coals, but still warm. You sit close, not just for the heat, but for the whispers, old voices, speaking low, passing knowledge back and forth in the kind of hush that makes things feel more sacred than secret. Tonight's topic isn't storytelling or baby teeth. It's pain, specifically what the Vikings did when things went wrong inside the mouth. And they did go wrong despite all the bark chewing and charcoal swishing. Nobody chews stone-ground bread for 30 years and escapes completely unscathed. Eventually a tooth cracks, a nerve flares, or an abscess bruise, beneath the gum line bubbling like an angry stew. You're watching an older man, mid-50s, maybe older, though it's hard to tell through the beard, lean over a younger warrior who's clearly in distress. The younger man clutches his jaw, sweat beading on his brow. He's breathing through his nose in shallow huffs, trying not to scream. It's a dental emergency, and what comes next isn't pretty. From a leather satchel, the older man, probably the village healer or leknir, pulls a small toolkit, curved metal picks, a wedge-shaped stone, and a satchel of herbs. He lights a sprig of dried juniper and waves the smoke beneath the other man's nose. Calming, sterilizing, symbolic. Then comes the real work. You look away as the healer presses the stone tool into the young man's mouth, twists and extracts something with a slick, wet pop. The man groans, then slumps, breathing hard. The healer rinses the tooth, or what's left of it, in a small bowl, inspects it, then drops it into a pouch, as if it were a prized relic. To you, this might seem barbaric. No anesthesia, no Novocaine, just smoke herbs and a brave jaw. But to them, this is medicine, it's ritual, it's relief, and it worked more often than you'd expect. In fact, archaeological studies of Viking graves show healed jawbones with clean extraction sites, signs that teeth were removed not in rage or panic, but by design. There were tools for this, methods, techniques passed from healer to healer across generations. Viking dental care wasn't always gentle, but it was astonishingly effective. Historians still argue whether these healers were trained formally or if it was more like a family craft passed from parent to child. But the skeletal evidence doesn't lie. Someone was doing the hard, horrible work of pulling infected teeth and doing it with enough care that the patient sometimes lived for many years afterward. You sit by the hearth trying not to picture yourself in that young warrior's place, one infected molar away from howling on a wooden bench, while your neighbor yanks it out with a bone clamp. And yet you have to admire the bravery, the practicality. There's another side to this too, pain relief. They didn't have aspirin or dental gels, but they had herbs, plenty of them. You see the healer crushing a bundle now. Willow bark, nature's aspirin mixed with dried cloves, known even in ancient times to numb the mouth. He grinds them into a paste and hands it to the recovering warrior, who smears it over the socket and leans back with a sigh. Other remedies included crushed garlic for infection, sage for swelling, and even honey, raw, unfiltered antibacterial honey, packed into the space where a tooth once lived. In some areas they used fish oil. In others they burned nettles and pressed the ash into sore gums. Some of it worked. Some of it was probably wishful thinking. But all of it came from observation, survival, and desperate necessity. You wander away from the scene as the wounded warrior drifts into sleep, propped against a fur-wrapped log. His jaws still swollen, but the tension has left his shoulders. He'll live. He might even keep the tooth as a warning or a trophy. And you're left marveling at the contradiction. A people remembered for raiding and pillaging, also capable of this careful, brutal compassion. A society that sang songs of war and honor, and also learned how to pack cloves into an aching socket. It's easy to dismiss the past as primitive. Harder to admit that sometimes it was just a different kind of wisdom. As you walk back through the longhouse, you catch a glimpse of a wall shelf. Simple wood darkened by smoke. On it sits a small bone container. Inside a set of ancient dental tools, picks, hooks, a spoon-shaped instrument used perhaps to scrape away infection or loosen a stubborn molar. The tools are clean, polished, respected, and in that quiet moment you understand something. Dental pain wasn't a personal shame. It wasn't hidden away like in modern times. It was faced. As a community, as a rite of survival, you weren't expected to endure in silence. You were expected to get through it and help others get through it too. That night, as the snow thickens outside and the fire casts lazy shadows on the rafters, you feel a strange sense of calm. Your own teeth ache slightly in sympathy, but your jaw is unbroken. Your gums are unbleeding. You lie back on your furs, heart full of stories and your mind echoing with a truth too often forgotten. Even in the harshest world, someone cared enough to try. The next morning you wake to the scent of damp earth and roasting grains. Outside the longhouse, the village is already alive. Carts creaking under sacks of barley goats, bleating in protest at being milked, and children chasing each other between frost-bitten patches of moss and mud. But your mind is somewhere else, still lingering in the quiet rhythm of that healer's hands, still caught on the thought of that little bone hook and what it meant not just for the mouth, but for the soul. As you step out into the brittle air, your boots crunch over gravel. It's breakfast time. A group of villagers gather near a communal hearth, sharing pieces of flatbread so dense you could shingle a roof with them. You chew slowly, very slowly. The bread is thick with grains, rye barley, and oats, and milled with stones that you now realize leave behind more than just flour. You run your tongue along your teeth and feel it grit. Not a lot, but enough to make each bite a mini exfoliation session. This, you learn, is no accident. The Vikings didn't have processed flour. Their mills were made of rough volcanic stone. When grain was ground down, tiny flecks of that stone made it into the final product. You might think, oh no, they're eating rocks, and yes, you'd be right. But here's the kicker: it helped. Stone particles acted as a mild abrasive scrubbing plaque and build up off the enamel. Sure, over a lifetime it wore teeth down. Some skulls show molars flattened smooth as coins, but it also meant fewer bacteria lurking in crevices, less rot, less decay. In other words, a Viking's daily diet accidentally functioned like a natural toothpaste. Historians still argue whether this was a happy accident or an understood benefit. Was it just a consequence of the available tools? Or did they realize the stone-flecked flour had an oral upside? We may never know. But what's certain is this: a lifetime of chewing rough bread helped polish their smiles in ways modern carbs can't compete with. You finish your bite and notice the others doing something similar, swishing water from clay cups, scraping a twig across their gums, casually spitting into the fire. This isn't some orchestrated ritual, it's just life. Practical, repetitive, efficient. You begin to wonder how this diet impacted other aspects of health. Without modern sugar, there were no sticky pastries, no soft candies melting in molars. Mead was sweet, yes, but made from honey, which contains antibacterial properties. And most of their sweets, if they had any, were in the form of berries or dried fruit consumed in small amounts and chewed slowly, not sucked over hours like a lollipop of doom. You walk past the village granary where women are grinding today's flour. The wheel turns slowly. You kneel to get a better look, and there it is, the stone surface, worn smooth in some places, still coarse in others. As the grains are crushed beneath it, a fine, dusty mist rises. You cough, and in that dust, the past hangs heavy. This isn't just baking, it's dentistry by breakfast. Nearby, a young girl brushes her teeth with what looks like a feather. She folds it in half, twists it slightly, and runs it along her gums. Not for show, not for play, for hygiene. The feather bends, cleans, then is wiped on a cloth tucked into her waistband. One more item in the Viking cleaning kit, alongside bone picks and chewed twigs. A middle-aged man passes by with an open grin, several teeth missing, but the ones he has are clean. Another contradiction: their teeth weren't flawless, but they weren't rotten. Wear and tear, yes. Decay, not so much. And that's where the myths break down. Modern depictions often show Vikings with black teeth, crooked gums, mouths filled with rot. It's cinematic, it's dramatic, but it's wrong. The real evidence: skulls unearthed from icy graves, bones pulled from bogs, tells a quieter, cleaner story. You recall a burial site in Sweden where a skull estimated to be nearly 1,000 years old showed nearly every tooth intact. No fillings, no whitening trays, no fluoride, just diet tools and tradition. The man died in battle, perhaps, but he died with his dental dignity. You keep walking past a smith sharpening blades, past a boy herding goats, past a woman boiling what smells like herbs and vinegar. She waves you over, dips a cloth into the brew, and offers it. You press it to your lips. Warm, sharp, almost lemony. She gestures toward your teeth and pantomimes wiping. You obey. Turns out vinegar wasn't just for flavor, it was a cleanser. Mixed with herbs like sage or thyme, it made a crude but effective mouth rinse. Viking DIY mouthwash. Astringent enough to kill bacteria, gentle enough to use daily. You smile, even though it burns a little. It's worth it. Later that day, you return to the longhouse for rest. The fire is low. Someone hums a lullaby in a language that sounds like the sea meeting stone. You stretch out on your bedding and let your jaw relax. Your teeth ache, not in pain, but in awareness. You're thinking about them more, feeling them, noticing every groove, every edge. And with that awareness comes a strange comfort. You're beginning to understand what the Vikings knew. Your teeth are a map of your life. What you chew, what you say, what you survive, all of it, written in enamel and bone. You drift off to the scent of grain and smoke a mouth rinsed clean by vinegar and a mind rinsed clean by unexpected reverence. By the time the next evening sets in, casting long blue shadows over the frost-covered roofs of the village, you've developed a strange respect for the way these people approach their health. Quiet, gritty, and unceremoniously efficient. You're standing near the edge of the settlement where a new kind of story is unfolding, not one told in verse or rune, but in bone. A group of travelers has arrived from another coastal region, and with them, they've brought not just furs and fish, but a curious artifact, a skull. Not as a trophy, not as a threat, but as evidence something found near the mouth of a fjord. After a spring flood unearthed an old grave. The villagers gather around as one of the travelers unwraps it, setting the yellowed relic on a flat stone by the fire. You lean in. The teeth are pristine. Not perfectly aligned, no, nature doesn't often gift us that, but clean, intact, free of deep cavities. There's some wear along the molars, sure, and a notch in one incisor, but otherwise the dental structure is almost eerily well preserved. One of the older villagers squints at the skull, then gestures to a leather pouch slung over his shoulder. He opens it and pulls out what can only be described as a dental toolkit. Here we are again, axe wielders with dental tools. The man picks through his kit a carved birch, pick a flat spatula-like scraper, a thin strip of cloth used to polish or perhaps even floss. He lays them beside the skull like a silent testimony. 1,000 years of continuity tools, passed from hand to hand, worn smooth by time and purpose. You're struck by the care with which he handles them. These are not the rough approximations you might expect from a culture often portrayed as barbaric. They're precise, well used, honed through generations. Historians still argue whether these toothsmiths were specialists or just skilled members of the community. There's little writing to confirm either way, but the consistency of findings across Viking sites, from Iceland to Denmark to the Orkneys, suggests a shared knowledge base. Whether passed through apprenticeship, oral tradition, or sheer necessity, someone knew how to care for teeth. And they weren't just doing it when things got dire. You hear from one of the travelers through a rough translation that some villages even had designated cleansers, people tasked with maintaining health and hygiene, including oral health. Not full-time dentists? No. But community members entrusted with knowledge of pain relief, herb use, and cleaning practices. Whether you believe it or not, the evidence sitting on that stone slab is grinning back at you. There's a hush as the skull is turned, revealing the back molars. One of them has a small round hole in the center, not caused by decay, but carved deliberately. You blink. Is it a drilled abscess relief? A ritual marking or something stranger? The old man murmurs something. A debate starts. Some say it was done post-mortem, others claim it was medicinal. Perhaps an attempt to relieve pressure from an infection. You listen carefully, picking up the occasional phrase, fever tooth, spirit wound, sky pain. Even today, scholars aren't sure what to make of these dental modifications. Were they early forms of surgery? Was there a belief that pain could be released through bone? Or was it part of a burial practice to prepare the body for the afterlife? By removing its suffering, there are no firm answers, only possibilities. Later, back inside the longhouse, the skull is placed in a respectful spot by the fire. A cloth is draped over it. The tools are cleaned and returned to their pouch. The fire crackles, casting flickers of orange over faces now thoughtful, quiet, reverent. You sip a warm drink made from fermented berries and roots. The taste is sharp but clean, almost floral. It lingers in your mouth in a way that makes you want to rinse afterward, which of course you do because this place has rubbed off on you. You use a piece of bark the same way the villagers do. Scrape, swish, spit. It's not glamorous, but your mouth feels better, more alive, like it belongs to someone connected to the earth in a way that plastic and fluoride never quite capture. The skull remains by the fire all evening, a reminder, not of death, but of preservation, of what can last. 1,000 years in the ground, and the teeth are still telling stories. You think back to your own dentist's office. Fluorescent lights, soft music, posters on the wall about flossing techniques. You think of that tiny mirror they used to poke at your molars, the little bib, the suction tube, and then you look at the man with the bone pick and the steady hands. No lights, no latex gloves, just skill, tradition, and firelight. And somehow it worked. As the night deepens, someone begins a quiet chant near the hearth. Not words, really, just syllables and sounds. A lullaby, maybe, or a ritual. You don't understand the language, but the meaning is clear. Honor what endures, even if it's just a tooth. Morning breaks slow and silver, a fog curling around the edge of the settlement like a cat that doesn't want to be noticed. You step outside the longhouse and everything is still, except for a soft scraping sound nearby. Another morning, another ritual. This time it's a woman seated on a low wooden stool by a stack of dried bread loaves, methodically sharpening the end of a slender twig with a flint knife. She dips it into a shallow bowl of ash and crushed mint leaves, then presses the twig to her teeth and starts to scrub. You're not surprised anymore. Charcoal and chewing bark. It's the Viking version of brushing your teeth, and it's oddly elegant in its simplicity. The charcoal derived from burned hardwoods like birch and alder binds to stains and bacteria. The mint, well, even in the 9th century, fresh breath had its perks. She pauses only to swish water from a horn cup, then spits into the dirt and begins again. You crouch beside her and she glances over with a faint smile, bare teeth slightly stained but whole strong. Her hair is braided with thin strips of leather and a bundle of herbs hangs from her belt. When she finishes, she offers you a turn. You accept. The twig is firmer than you expect, and the ash mixture feels oddly gritty, but not unpleasant. You scrub gently as you've seen done so many times before and rinse with the cool water she hands you. When you're done, your mouth tastes clean. Not spearmint clean, but forest clean. And it lingers. This, you think, is not just about hygiene. It's about presence, ritual, being aware of your body and caring for it with what you have. You walk with her back toward the main hearth. Along the way, you pass a man using a feather shaft as a flossing tool. The tip bends as he works it between his teeth, methodical as a monk. A few children chew on thin sticks, walking slowly to school, if you can call a thatch roof room with carved benches school. And that's when you notice something else. The language around you has shifted. Not just spoken words, but what they choose to describe. Teeth are not a separate issue here, they're part of the whole body. You overhear one man joke about another's strong jaw. Another praises a girl for bare teeth, meaning strength and good health. These are compliments. These are values. In Viking culture, your mouth wasn't just a tool, it was your identity. Historians still argue whether these metaphors were literal health assessments or just poetic language. But it's undeniable that strong teeth equated to strong spirit. Warriors with full sets of teeth into their 40s or 50s were seen as not only fortunate but blessed. In some burial sites, intact jaws have been found with decorative beads. Nearby, perhaps offerings for a life well chewed. You wander toward the edge of the village where an older woman sits beside a small shrine carved into stone. She wears a simple woolen cloak and has a pouch open in her lap. Inside are bits of plant bone and ash. She's mixing them carefully, muttering under her breath. A paste, you realize, for pain relief. She gestures for you to sit, dips her finger into the paste, and gently presses it to the base of your molars. It's warm, a little spicy, numbing. Clove and something else, maybe juniper or sweet flag root. She grins as your eyes widen. She knows it works. She doesn't need science to prove it. Her knowledge has been passed down by feel, by taste, by firelight repetition. And it has worked. You think of modern clove oil still used in dental emergencies and wonder how many ancient trial and error nights it took to discover this little miracle. You wonder who first realized that the bark of one tree numbs pain while another freshens breath. Who first said, "This twig, this is the one," and passed that knowledge forward for centuries. By midday, you find yourself back at the food preparation area. Someone is grinding more herbs. Others are baking flatbreads. And always there is chewing, gnawing, swishing, scraping, quiet, persistent oral upkeep, woven into every meal, every pause, every conversation. This isn't obsession, it's integration. You sit near a young man combing his beard with one hand, and flossing with a sinew cord in the other. He hums softly and you realize the tune is the same one you heard last night. A lullaby, maybe, or just a rhythm for the task at hand. He finishes, ties the cord into a loop, and hangs it beside his belt. Then he stands and lifts his spear. Yes, he's going hunting, with floss on his hip. You laugh a little quietly, but it's not mockery, it's awe. Imagine if we lived like this now, if oral health weren't a chore or a crisis, but a constant low-grade habit. No panic at the dentist, no shame around bad breath. Just a twig, a wash, a rinse, and a world where teeth are treated with the same attention we give our weapons or words. You follow the hunter to the edge of the forest where the trees lean like old men sharing secrets. He vanishes into the mist and you're left with the soft swaying of the evergreens and the echo of something ancient. Care doesn't have to be complicated. Sometimes all it takes is bark breath and belief. It's well past dusk now, and you're sitting with a circle of warriors, the fire casting long shadows on their faces, smoke spiraling into the open sky. They're passing around a drinking horn filled with mead, laughing trading boasts, and biting into strips of smoked meat. But in between bites and sips, something unusual catches your eye. Every so often one of them pauses, reaches into a belt pouch, and casually slides a twig between his teeth. Not chewing this time, scraping, methodical, rhythmic, almost meditative. This isn't post-meal cleanup, it's maintenance, it's ritual. And then it hits you, the mead conundrum. You'd almost forgotten. Vikings drank a lot of mead, fermented honey water herbs. It was central to their culture, ceremonial, celebratory, and soothing, but also, in theory, a recipe for tooth decay. Sugar is sugar, right? But here's the weird part. Despite mead being everywhere, Viking skulls show low rates of cavities. How you watch as another warrior wipes his teeth with a strip of cloth dipped in something dark. It smells like ash, maybe charcoal mixed with bitter herbs. A rinse, a rub. Either way, it's clearly part of a larger system. They weren't just drinking mead and hoping for the best. So you start asking questions. Through broken translation and a few helpful gestures, you piece it together. Mead was usually consumed with food, not alone, not endlessly. It was sipped during meals, not guzzled all day. And their meals, low carb, low starch, low sugar. So even with the occasional sweet drink, the bacterial playground of modern diets didn't really exist. Plus, honey has natural antibacterial properties. That's right, what makes it sticky and sweet. Also helps fight off infections. Historians still debate how much this mattered, but the chemistry's there. Mead may have been less of a threat than modern soda or fruit juice. Still, the Vikings didn't take chances. You notice again that tooth cleaning followed every drink, not in a panicked afterthought kind of way, but with quiet focus. Rinse, chew, scrape. Some even dip their cleaning twigs in herbs, before use things like yarrow sage or sweet flag to coat their mouths with natural antiseptics. You take a sip of mead yourself. It's sweeter than you expected, but not cloying. There's a sour edge to it, a fermented sharpness that makes your gums tingle. And once again, a woman near you offers that familiar bowl of mint and ash. You accept, rub a pinch along your teeth, and find yourself wondering why your bathroom routine ever needed plastic tubes and artificial flavoring. One of the warriors begins to tell a story, a drunken tale to be fair, about a man who tried to seduce a goddess and got punched in the mouth for his trouble. Everyone laughs. The punchline, he lost 3 teeth and then carved one into a comb. The crowd howls. It's clearly a joke, but there's a grain of truth there. Tooth beads remember carved molars found on necklaces. There are even accounts, fringe but real, of warriors who wore a relative's tooth as a charm. Not in a creepy way, in a carry their strength with me kind of way. Teeth were not just function, they were legacy. And the mead they toast with, it's part of that legacy too. Viking feasts weren't just about excess. They were about connection between people, between past and present. And caring for your body during those celebrations was as important as the celebration itself. You think back to the modern association between sugar and shame. Guilt over dessert, flossing out of fear, dental care framed as punishment for pleasure. But here, oral health isn't punishment. It's pride. It's preparation. You sit by the fire tongue running along your teeth out of habit now. They feel rough but clean, real. Your breath smells like birch and bitter mint. You've lost track of time. You're not sure what century your mind lives in anymore. As the night grows deeper, you hear someone say something that sticks with you. It's muttered casually, but it lands like a proverb. A man who can't chew can't fight. A man who can't speak can't lead. And there it is. That's the reason for all this bark chewing and sinew flossing and post-mead rinsing. Teeth weren't a cosmetic concern, they were foundational. To eat, to command, to sing, to survive. You tilt your head back and look at the stars. Somewhere in the misty edge of the sky, the aurora flickers like a whisper. Cold light, quiet breath, warm fire. Your mouth feels ready for whatever tomorrow brings. It's early afternoon when you join a group setting off for the nearby market. Just a loose gathering of villagers walking along a muddy track, through frost-bitten fields, pulling carts, herding goats, and carrying bundles of trade goods on their backs. You fall in line boots squelching in the half-frozen dirt, watching the community in motion. The walk is long, and along the way, conversation flows easily. At one point, a man jokes about his neighbor's runestone breath, and the group erupts in laughter. Someone hands him a piece of bark and says, "Then chew this old goat." Even their insults are hygiene-based. You can't help but smile. You're starting to get it now. As the path opens into a clearing near a riverbank, the makeshift market appears just a ring of tents and carts, but buzzing with activity. Fish strung up in rows, baskets of dried herbs, pelts laid out like patchwork rugs. You wander between stalls, admiring the craftsmanship beads, antler combs, carved spoons, and wait, there it is. A display of tooth-cleaning tools. You stop half in awe, half in disbelief. It's not some rare oddity tucked into a corner. It's front and center. The merchant, a woman with graying braids and calloused hands, smiles at you and lifts a bundle of sharpened sticks, bound with leather cord. Some are plain. Some have patterns etched into the sides. One has a carved wolf's head at the base. These are for the teeth someone translates for you. Birch, mint, sage dipped. Good after meat or sweet drink. You pick one up. It's warm from the sun, polished smooth, where countless fingers have held it. It's simple, yet elegant, a tool of daily life treated with respect. Next to the sticks are small pouches of herbal ash and charcoal mixtures labeled with hand-drawn symbols. The merchant offers you a sample. You dip your finger in, touch it to your tongue. Earthy, bitter, clean. You buy one, of course. Further along, you find a craftsman carving a comb from bone. His tools are tiny and precise, and the comb itself is delicate, more decorative than practical, but still functional. He gestures to a basket filled with similar items: bone toothpicks with spiral handles, metal picks with looped ends, even one set in a bronze case shaped like a serpent. Historians still argue whether these beautifully crafted tools were symbols of wealth, tokens of affection, or simply evidence that even hygiene can be art. The evidence says probably all three. Viking culture didn't just value cleanliness, they honored the tools that helped achieve it. You pass a tent where a man is preparing something in a bubbling pot. A bitter herbal smell curls around you. He invites you closer and shows you a wooden ladle filled with a thick, dark liquid. "Rinse," he says, handing you a small horn cup. You try it. It's strong, like thyme vinegar and maybe pine. It burns a little. You swish it anyway. Afterward, your tongue tingles, your breath feels sharper, and your mouth is left with the lingering sensation of walking through a cold forest. You ask him through gestures and words how often people use this. He shrugs. When needed, he says, before feast, after sickness, or when the mouth is not right. There it is again, pragmatic but aware. Oral care not as obligation but as intuitive balance. If the mouth felt wrong, you fixed it. If it felt fine, you maintained it. Not because someone made you, because life required it. You head back through the market with your new tools in hand. You pass a mother rubbing paste on her son's gums while he squirms. You spot a man inspecting his reflection in a polished shield, running a stick across his molars with idle precision. Even a young couple flirtatiously sharing a handful of herb-coated bark strips. Like candy, the market winds down as the sun tilts toward the treetops. People pack up their goods, load their carts, and prepare for the walk back. You fall into step beside a woman who hums as she walks, chewing a mint-smeared twig like a toothy metronome. She offers you another and you accept it without thinking. This has become second nature. On the way home, you notice the riverbanks more clearly. Not just the sparkling current or the reeds bending in the wind, but the wear patterns in the stones where people have knelt for generations to rinse their mouths. Small depressions carved not by hands, but by repetition. Mouths dipped, water swirled, time smoothed away by habits. You kneel there too, dipping your fingers into the cold current, splashing your face, rinsing your mouth one more time before re-entering the village. It's strange how these small acts make you feel rooted, like you're not just borrowing their tools or mimicking their behaviors. You're participating in something ancient, something shared, a long, unbroken line of people who knew that the health of the mouth shapes the strength of the voice, and the strength of the voice shapes the world. It's after supper and you find yourself back in the longhouse, legs stretched out by the fire, the day's cold finally chased from your bones. Around you, the hum of a full village, winding down low conversation, the clink of wooden bowls being stacked, a baby fussing sleepily from across the room. But one thing breaks the quiet like a knife through butter, a sudden grunt of pain. Heads turn. A young man, a sailor by the look of his salt-stiffened cloak, is pressing a hand to his cheek, face flushed, eyes tight. He's got a toothache, and it's a bad one. You wince instinctively. You've felt that pain before, that sharp, buzzing, brain-rattling throb that comes not from outside, but from deep within the root. A pain that doesn't wait for permission. A pain that demands attention. He collapses onto a fur mat jaw, clenched, rocking slightly. Within moments, two people are at his side, a healer and a woman carrying a carved wooden box. She opens it carefully. Inside are thin slivers of bone, small wooden sticks, dried herbs in cloth bundles, and a spoon-like tool made of bronze. No scalpels, no syringes. But the box feels just as serious as any modern emergency kit. You scoot closer, watching as the healer examines the sailor's mouth. She presses on the gum near his molars, listens to his muffled groan, and nods once. Infection. Maybe from a cracked tooth. Maybe from trapped food. Maybe from just being alive in a time when antibiotics are a distant dream. She takes out one of the sticks, its end flattened like a miniature spatula, and dips it into a paste. Then she packs it against the gum with practiced ease. The sailor relaxes almost immediately. Not totally, but enough. You catch the scent from where you're sitting. Clove garlic, something bitter and sharp, maybe crushed yarrow. It's a numbing blend, a poultice made to draw out pain, maybe even reduce infection. Historians still debate how effective these herbal concoctions were. But what's clear, sitting here in firelight, is that they did something. enough to buy time, enough to let the body fight on. You wonder how many times this same routine has played out in this village or hundreds like it over the years. How many teeth were soothed, how many lives were saved by these simple interventions. The woman with the kit is calm, steady. This isn't dramatic, it's ordinary. Toothaches happen, and when they do, you deal with them. She finishes by tying a small bundle of herbs to a leather cord and handing it to the sailor, who mumbles thanks and tucks it into his tunic. A charm, perhaps, or just an old-school backup in case the pain returns. Later, as things settle and people drift toward sleep, someone strikes up a song, a quiet one, half-hummed, half-sung with words you don't quite understand. But the melody carries curling around the rafters like smoke. You close your eyes, letting the sound wash over you, and think again about that sailor. In the modern world, a toothache is an inconvenience, bad, yes, but usually fixable. In Viking times, it could be fatal. An abscess left untreated could lead to sepsis. Swelling could close a throat. An infection could spread to the blood. It wasn't just about pain, it was about survival. But here's the miracle. Despite the lack of anesthesia, the lack of x-rays, the lack of toothbrushes and toothpaste and dental charts, the Vikings survived. More than that, they adapted. They learned what soothed, what worked, what didn't. They created systems, tools, rituals. Toothpicks became heirlooms. Poultices became prescriptions. And even in the absence of science as we know it, their mouths endured. And now yours does too. You reach into your own pouch. Yes, you've started carrying one and pull out your favorite bark strip. You chew slowly, the taste bitter, then sweet, then clean. Your fingers know the shape of your new bone pick. Your lips remember the sting of mint-rubbed ash. You've come a long way from plastic toothbrushes and electric flossers, and somehow your mouth has never felt more human. The fire cracks once, then settles into a soft hum. Around you, people are falling asleep in groups. The sailor breathes deeply, pain dulled for now. The healer tucks away her tools, wrapping each in cloth like precious metal. And you, silent, still, and content, chew your bark like you've always lived here. Because for tonight, you have. By midday the next day, you're walking alone along a snow-dusted trail just outside the village, the trees rising like dark ribs around you. There's a chill in the air, but your breath doesn't come in huffs anymore. You've acclimated. Even your jaw feels stronger from all the bark chewing. If you had to bite into a dried elk tendon today, you might actually enjoy it. The trail curves downward toward a quiet grove where you find something that at first doesn't quite make sense. A circle of stones neatly placed, with bundles of herbs hanging nearby, and a few smooth river rocks stacked in careful piles. At the center sits a single carved stone, low and flat, with a depression worn into its surface. Not deep, just enough to cradle something. This is not a grave, it's a ritual site. And what lies in the center of the stone, dusted lightly with snow, a single tooth. Human by the look of it, yellowed with age, intact, the root still curved like a fishhook. It's been placed there deliberately, not discarded, not lost, offered. You kneel slowly. Around the edge of the stone, someone has etched runes. You can't read them, but the intent is clear. This is sacred, a place of release, perhaps even thanks. You begin to understand this is the final chapter in a Viking tooth's journey, not just cleaning and using and chewing, but parting with it, honoring what the body once carried. Historians still argue whether such rituals were common or isolated. Were teeth left behind as part of funerary rites? Were they offerings to gods like air, the healer, or simply tokens of survival? I endured this, and now I let it go. There's no consensus, but again the evidence sits before you: worn stone ritual bundles, a single tooth cradled like treasure. You reach out not to touch, but to acknowledge. A nod, a breath. It's a strangely emotional moment. In a culture where strength was survival, where pain was often endured in silence, the act of placing a tooth in a grove suggests something softer, a quiet reverence for the body even in its brokenness. You remain for a while, watching the snow fall in silent spirals. A bird chirps overhead. The trees sway but do not speak. And eventually you stand and walk back, your own teeth clenched gently, not from tension, but from a renewed awareness of their place in the world. By the time you return to the village, it's clear something is happening. A feast, maybe. Preparations are underway, fire pits being stoked, game being skinned, bread dough rising in carved wooden troughs. But what grabs your attention is what's missing. No one's rushing. Everyone's moving with purpose, but also with care. And woven into every task again is hygiene. A man splits open a smoked fish, then rinses his hands and his mouth in a nearby bucket. A child is told gently but firmly to finish cleaning their teeth before coming to the feast fire. Even the elders, seated in a circle near the main hearth, are carefully scraping bits of root across their gums. The more you look, the more you realize this isn't for show. It's not vanity. It's not even health in the modern medical sense. It's ritualized readiness. Just as one sharpens a blade before battle or oils a shield before winter, so too does one cleanse their mouth before a gathering. It's about presence, about offering your best self to the moment, about participating fully. And it makes sense. A healthy mouth allows you to speak clearly, eat without pain, laugh without shame. It is not a luxury, it is access to life. You approach one of the preparation fires where a woman is stirring a thick paste in a shallow clay bowl. It smells herbal, sharp, familiar. You recognize juniper, crushed mint, maybe some salt and vinegar, a rinse, a cleanser. She nods as you reach for it, offering a small ladle. You sip and swish. It burns gently, cuts through the taste of travel and cold air, and leaves your tongue humming like a struck bell. Then you see her lift a second bowl, this one filled with small sticks, ends frayed like tiny paintbrushes. People come forward, choose one, and use it before joining the feast. It's ceremonial, yes, but also utterly normal. You take a stick, chew the end, feel the fibers bloom like bristles, and gently run it along your gums. One of the elders gives you an approving nod. You didn't need translation for that. Later at the feast, everyone eats with easy grace. You notice it more now, the way jaws move evenly, the way no one winces from sudden pain. These are working mouths, well-kept tools. There's laughter, loud and unself-conscious. No one hides their teeth. You bite into a slab of roasted meat, clean and rich with smoke. It tears easily. You chew without effort, without worry. And in that moment, surrounded by people, fire, food, and laughter, you realize something profound. Caring for your teeth isn't just about survival. It's about being ready to speak, to share, to connect, to live. The morning after the feast is quiet, the kind of quiet that settles deep into your bones, the kind that makes you move slower, breathe deeper. You walk the edge of the village where frost still clings to the grass boots, crunching softly underfoot. A light mist rolls through the trees like a ghost that forgot something. You're not alone for long. An elder approaches stooped, bundled in a thick cloak beard braided with bits of bone and silver wire. His eyes are bright despite the heavy lines on his face. He doesn't speak, just gestures for you to follow, and so you do. He leads you up a rocky slope behind the village, away from the longhouses, the goats, the children. Higher, colder, your legs burn slightly from the climb. And then you reach it, a flat clearing framed by stones and low shrubs facing east. There, etched into the rock face in patient ancient strokes, are runes. You can't read them, but the elder touches one carefully, then taps his teeth and nods. A story is carved here, about the mouth, about speech, about strength. You sit on a nearby stone as he slowly opens a small leather pouch. Inside are items you recognize now: a bone, pick a chewed twig, a bundle of sage. But there's also something new, a kind of dark paste wrapped in linen, smelling faintly of resin and thyme. He smears it on his gums with one knotted finger, then offers you a pinch. You accept, rub it gently inside your mouth, and feel an instant warmth, not a burn, but a grounding sensation, like your jaw has remembered something it forgot. Then he speaks, slowly, clearly, in a voice that crackles but never falters. He points to his chest, then his throat, then his mouth. His words aren't just coming from his lungs. They're shaped, guided, delivered by his teeth and tongue. You watch him speak as if you're watching a ritual, because you are. And you realize something essential. For the Vikings, oral hygiene wasn't just about chewing and eating and not dying from a toothache. It was about speaking clearly. It was about being heard. In a culture where memory lived in voices, not on paper, where laws were spoken aloud and sagas were recited by firelight, your mouth wasn't just your tool for survival, it was your legacy. Historians still argue whether oral health was formally associated with power in Viking society, but there's no question skalds, leaders, elders, those who held knowledge and passed it on, had to speak, had to teach, had to command. And that required a healthy mouth. You sit in silence, the resin paste still tingling, and think about your own world, your own mouth. How often you've winced through a sore molar during a conversation. How quickly your confidence shrinks when your breath is off, when your voice falters. The elder taps your shoulder and points out across the valley. Below you, the village stirs, smoke rising from chimneys, voices echoing faintly through the cold air. You can almost hear it, the rhythm of speech, the bounce of laughter, the subtle melody of shared language. And you understand the health of a voice begins with the health of the mouth. You both descend slowly. On the way down, he pauses by a tree, breaks off a twig, and hands it to you. It's rough, with small buds just beginning to form. You chew the end, feel it soften, then run it across your teeth out of habit now. You're part of the rhythm. You've joined the song. Back in the village, a group has gathered by the central hearth. One of the younger warriors is practicing a speech, maybe for a coming-of-age rite, maybe for an upcoming raid. He stumbles once, then again. An elder calls him over and hands him a bark stick. "Speak clean," the elder says in words simple enough to translate. And so he does. He chews, he rinses, he breathes, and then he begins again. Stronger this time, clearer. There's power in that. You spend the rest of the day watching for it everywhere. A woman coaching her daughter on a prayer, brushing her teeth beforehand, like a performer preparing for stage. A group of boys practicing insults, playful but sharp, and each of them chewing between lines like it's part of the script. A man preparing to recite a family lineage before the village, calmly rubbing clove oil along his gums. They all understand the same truth: what you say matters, and how you say it, how it sounds, how it feels, how it survives. The wind begins with the mouth. You sit quietly as the sun dips low, and for the first time, you don't chew just to clean. You chew to prepare, to honor your voice, to honor theirs. That night, a storm rolls in from the fjord. You hear it first as a low groan through the pine trees, then as sharp cracks of wind against the longhouse walls. Inside, the fire burns high and steady. People draw closer, wrapped in furs, trading stories and warmth. You're nestled among them, still chewing gently on a softened stick, your gums tingling faintly with the lingering mint and bark. It's become automatic now, something your jaw just does, like breathing. Not performative, not conscious. A habit as natural as sleep. And tonight's story, it begins with a tooth. A skald sits in the firelight, hands folded over his knees. He's older, his beard a smoky gray, his fingers gnarled like tree roots. His voice, though, is sharp and deliberate, curling through the room like smoke. He tells of a warrior whose tooth shattered during battle, not from a blade or a blow, but from biting down too hard when he screamed his war cry. It lodged in his tongue, the story goes, and nearly cost him the ability to speak. But instead of retreating, the man bit down on a piece of oak bark, numbed the pain, and finished the fight. And after the battle, he carved a replica of that tooth from bone and wore it around his neck to remind himself, a voice without teeth is a wind without trees. The room is quiet when the story ends. Not solemn, respectful. You feel it, how even a tale like this, likely embroidered over generations, holds truth. Historians still debate how much of Viking oral tradition was preserved through real memory versus poetic license. But one thing is certain: they believed in the power of a mouth, its ability to command, to curse, to charm, to lead. And they protected it with the same care they gave their blades and ships. You find yourself thinking about modern equivalents. We protect our voices with microphones and vitamins. We fix our teeth with drills and braces and whitening strips. But how often do we stop to think about what those things mean? For the Vikings, each tooth was not just function, it was symbol. A tool of the body and the spirit. As the fire dwindles and the storm howls harder, someone begins passing around a small pouch of herbal rub. You've seen this before, mixed by the village healer, applied to sore gums or used to prevent infection. You take a pinch, press it against your back molars, and close your eyes. You remember the skull by the hearth. You remember the ritual grove and the single tooth on the stone. You remember the sailor groaning with pain, soothed by hands that knew what to do. You remember the woman in the market displaying picks like jewelry. And now you begin to remember something else: your own mouth, your own rituals. Not just brushing or flossing, but speaking, laughing, whispering secrets, kissing someone goodbye. Every one of those moments passed through your teeth, was shaped by your tongue, was powered by breath and intention. You open your eyes. The fire is down to coals. Most of the longhouse sleeps, but you're awake, chewing bark, swishing water, breathing deeply, and feeling for the first time in a long time that your mouth is not a forgotten corner of your body, but a compass, a bridge, a voice. A man beside you shifts in his sleep, mumbling something in Old Norse. You don't understand the words, but the tone is warm, familiar. Maybe he's dreaming of a feast, or a story, or a voice he loved. You lean back and watch the shadows dance against the rafters. Teeth, you think. Just bone, really. But also not. Also memory. Also voice. Also you. The storm breaks just before dawn, leaving the village blanketed in a fine crust of snow that glows blue in the first light. You step outside into the hushed stillness boots, crunching breath fogging in the air. Everything smells like pine smoke and wet bark. The longhouse behind you exhales warm air through its thatched eaves. The world feels refreshed. You wander toward the outskirts where the burial mounds rise in gentle humps, white-tipped like sleeping giants. And there, near one of the older mounds, you find a low stone table half buried in snow. Upon it, wrapped carefully in fur, lies a collection of grave goods offerings left by the living. You recognize the usual beads, a drinking horn, a tiny carved figure. But there's something else, a bundle of old tools tucked tightly together with sinew cord. A pick, a twig whittled smooth, a comb, a feather, and at the center, a molar, polished, worn, drilled clean through and strung on a leather thong. You kneel in the snow and just stare at it. It's not the first time you've seen a tooth treated this way, but the meaning finally lands with clarity. This isn't decoration, it's tribute, it's legacy. Historians still argue whether Viking grave goods were symbolic or literal tools for the afterlife. But this bundle feels personal. Someone buried their loved one with the items they used every day, not just weapons, but the implements of speech and self-care. It tells a different kind of story. One not about conquest or wealth, but about identity. You reach for the edge of the fur, then stop yourself. It doesn't feel right to touch. Not here. Not this. Instead, you sit quietly and try to imagine the person who owned these tools. Were they a skald, a healer, just someone who spoke well and cared for their mouth because it let them speak clearly, laugh loudly, kiss warmly, and you realize again that every Viking death was also the end of a voice, a tone, a cadence, something unrepeatable, and so they honored it. You return to the village with new weight in your steps, not heaviness exactly, just depth, the kind that comes from seeing something you thought was mundane now glint with meaning. Inside the longhouse, breakfast has begun: flatbread fish, a thick root stew. People eat, speak, laugh. And once again you see the pattern emerge. After eating, they clean. Quietly, without direction, the children mimic the adults. One boy shows off a birch twig he's carved with little hash marks. His sister flicks him with hers like a sword. You sit near the hearth and watch the elder from yesterday, the one who led you to the ritual cliff, clean his teeth in silence. He uses a carved stick with a pointed end, then runs a feather through the gaps in his teeth, like threading a needle. He notices you watching and holds it up. Talk comes through here, he says, in thick accented common. If you do not care for this, he taps his teeth. You have no words. Then he goes back to cleaning. There's a moment of stillness around the fire. No one speaks. Everyone's doing the same thing, tending to their mouths, chewing, scraping, rinsing. It's almost reverent. You begin to see it as liturgy, not religious in a strict sense, but spiritual, a collective act that centers the body and the self. The same way some cultures wash feet before prayer or light incense before song, these people tend to their mouths before entering the day, before talking, before living. And honestly, it makes sense. We call it a smile. But it's also a gateway to truth, to connection, to identity, to survival. You chew your own twig, slowly savoring the clean, sharp flavor. Your gums feel alive, your jaw strong, your breath fresh and sharp like the morning snow. Later that afternoon, you find yourself helping repair one of the boats by the shore. It's hard work scraping old pitch, sanding wood, mending ropes. But even here, among the salt and sweat and smoke, you spot familiar gestures. One of the men pauses, chews a fresh strip of sweet flagroot, then spits the fibers into the sea. Another man rubs his tongue with ash from the cooking fire. A boy hums to himself while picking at his back molars with the end of a fishbone. There's no ceremony, no applause. But you're seeing it now. Hygiene as second nature, as deeply ingrained as knowing how to tie a rope or swing a hammer. And when the repairs are done and the sun begins to slide behind the tree line, you gather with the others around a driftwood fire. Someone pulls out a horn of mead. It's passed from hand to hand, and again you sip, slowly tasting honey and smoke and sea. But this time, when the horn reaches the end of the circle, something happens. The last man raises it high and says, "Two words that carry far." Then he reaches into his belt, pulls out a toothpick, and begins to clean his mouth. The others do the same. A toast, a rinse, a ritual. And in that moment, you realize that you are not just witnessing a culture. You've become part of one. The sun doesn't rise so much as emerge, a pale disk behind clouds that never fully lift. It bathes the village in silver rather than gold, making every tree trunk look like a standing ghost and every breath like drifting thread. But the air is crisp and your mouth is clean, and that's enough. Today you're riding on a cart with two traders toward a neighboring settlement. The journey is slow, the path muddy, the wheels complaining over every stone. But the company is good. They speak in bursts, stories, jokes, and occasionally songs. You mostly listen, chewing bark tongue, flicking automatically to catch the lingering mint. One of the men, a bearded mountain of a fellow, with a braid down his chest, suddenly curses and clutches his jaw. Tooth, he grunts, more annoyed than pained. His partner laughs and hands him a small leather roll. You recognize it immediately, a traveling dental kit. It's smaller than the ones you've seen in the village, but no less complete. Miniature picks a bark bundle, a pouch of powdered ash. The big man unrolls it, selects a flat stick, stained dark from use, and begins to press it along the inside of his gum. You watch as the tension drains from his shoulders. He spits once into the grass, shrugs, and says, "Back to market." It's that fast, that simple, and that common. This isn't just a village quirk, it's Viking-wide. You think back to the skulls found in burial sites far from here, from Norway, Denmark, even outposts as far-flung as Greenland. Many of them show signs of similar dental patterns, low cavities, heavy wear, surprisingly little rot. And often found near them are tools. Simple, practical, personalized. Historians still argue how much of this was standard across Norse culture and how much was regional. But one thing is clear: wherever the longboats touched, the habits traveled too. The cart stops in a clearing and the traders leap down to stretch. While they do, you walk toward a fallen tree and sit pulling your own cleaning twig from your pouch. You've customized yours, whittled the grip, softened the bristles. You chew slowly, then swipe it gently across your back teeth. The act soothes you now, grounds you. From a distance, you must look like you belong here. You return to the cart just in time to hear the traders arguing about something strange: war paint, not battle tactics. Face paint, specifically a debate about whether blackening one's teeth made a warrior more terrifying. One of them claims that a famous chieftain did exactly that, coating his mouth with soot and oil before raids to appear more monstrous. The other rolls his eyes. Bad for the breath, he mutters. And there it is again, this cultural tension between appearance and function, between theater and practicality. Modern depictions of Vikings often lean into the grime, the gore, the madness. But here, riding on a cart past birch trees and frozen ponds, you see a different kind of Viking, one who thinks about breath, about speech, about what happens after the shouting stops. You arrive at the neighboring village by midday. It's smaller, quieter, but no less alive. Children run between houses, women weave. A man carves something by the fire, tapping bone against bone. And everywhere you look, the same gestures. Someone rinsing with snowmelt water. A boy chewing a root to distract from teething pain. A girl sharpening a twig just right before handing it to her grandfather. You're introduced to the local healer, a stoic woman with a satchel that jingles faintly as she walks. Inside are tools nearly identical to those you've seen before, picks, pastes, powders, cloths. She offers you a pinch of something yellow and bitter. You taste it and gag slightly. She chuckles. Cleans the tongue, someone translates. Also frightens demons. You're not sure which is the intended effect, but your mouth does feel oddly purified afterward. As you help unload goods and trade for smoked fish and wool, you begin to see just how portable this dental culture is. It's not tied to hearths or clinics. It travels. In pouches, in pockets, in rituals small enough to fit behind an ear. One of the traders hands a carved pick to the local blacksmith as a gift. He grins, inspects the craftsmanship, and immediately tucks it into the folds of his belt. A moment later, he's testing it between his molars. Not for show, not for novelty, but because that's what you do. You stay for a shared meal, roasted root vegetables, dried fish, and a bitter tea made from boiled spruce tips. And again, after eating, you see it, the communal clean. One by one, everyone tends to their mouths. It's not choreographed, it's not commanded, it's culture. On the cart ride back, you watch the trees blur past and think about what this all means. Not just the tools, but the mindset. A Viking's oral health wasn't just about avoiding pain, it was about preparing to live, to eat, to lead, to love, to speak. And if you believe the stories, to shout your name into the halls of Valhalla. You chew one last piece of bark before sleep that night and feel every part of your jaw soften into stillness. Not numb, just right. Because now it's not about being clean, it's about being ready. You wake to a sky carved from slate, the kind that promises more snow or maybe something heavier. It's quiet but not dead, just that specific Viking quiet where even the birds seem to step carefully. You walk down to the water's edge where the longboats rock gently against the shore, their carved prows reaching forward like wolves in sleep. You sit on a flat stone near the shallows, pulling a bundle from your pouch. Your cleaning stick, the soft cloth for wiping your gums, and a pinch of dried sage powder you traded for yesterday. You go through the motions now without thinking. It's not imitation anymore, it's ritual, it's yours. And as you sit there cleaning your teeth in the shadow of dragon-headed ships, you remember a question you hadn't asked yet. What happened when a Viking lost all their teeth? You stand, stretch, and go looking. The healer greets you near the smokehouse arms, coated in ash. Face calm. You ask the question. She frowns, not because she doesn't understand, but because she's considering the best way to answer. Then she gestures for you to follow. She takes you to a small side hut, a space used more for storage than healing. Inside, beneath layers of bundled cloth and bone tools, She pulls out something extraordinary, a jawbone. But this one is different. It's ancient, clearly the bone bleached by time. But what stuns you isn't the age, it's what's inside it. Some of the molars are original, cracked and worn, but others have been replaced, pegged perhaps. Bone slipped into sockets and held in place with sinew and pitch. One tooth is bronze, another appears to be carved from antler. You stare. This isn't a burial jaw. It's not a prop. This was used. The healer says a word, stendur. You don't know it, but someone nearby translates. It means it stands, or it endures. Historians still debate whether Viking society used prosthetic teeth. There's evidence, but it's scattered, and some dismiss it as post-mortem modification or ceremonial symbolism. But here in your hands is something very real. A jaw that refused to be left useless. A mouth rebuilt. You run your finger lightly along the bronze molar. It's rough, pitted, but it fits. And you realize losing teeth wasn't the end. It was just another chapter. Back outside, you help haul water from the stream, thoughts still turning like wheels over mud. You think about how, in your time, people fear aging teeth. We hide them, fix them, cap them in porcelain. We act like they should last forever, but not in a working way, in a museum way. The Vikings were different. They expected wear. They respected it. Your teeth told your story not because they were perfect, but because they'd been used. Used for words, for meat, for bark, for breath. And when they were gone sometimes, replaced, not for vanity, for function. Later that afternoon, you're invited to a small ceremony. A man, gray-haired and straight-backed, is preparing to travel. Not to raid, not to trade, to pass. He's dying, peacefully. His family gathers around the longhouse still and warm with smoke and silence. You expect tears, you expect final words. But what you don't expect is the way one of the younger women, his granddaughter, maybe kneels beside him with a satchel of grooming tools. She gently cleans his face, his hands, and yes, his mouth. She uses a soft cloth soaked in something herbal, presses it to his gums, runs it across his lips. She uses a pick to gently clean between his remaining teeth, not because he's dirty, because he is important. Historians don't often write about this, the small final rites, the oral care not as hygiene but as honor. But seeing it now in the soft firelight, you understand something bigger. A clean mouth meant a clear path, to speak to the gods, to leave nothing behind unsaid, to meet death with dignity. After he sleeps, perhaps for the last time, the family lays a bundle beside him. You know what it is before they unwrap it. His own cleaning kit, used, familiar, sacred. They will bury him with it. And for the first time in your life, the idea that someone might take a toothpick into the afterlife doesn't seem strange. It seems right. That night you chew your bark more slowly, not out of necessity, but out of reverence, for all the mouths that have come before you, for all the words they shaped, for all the stories they left behind in bone. The day of your departure arrives slowly, as if the sky itself is reluctant to let you go. You pack in silence, folding the garments you've borrowed, tucking your now weathered bark bundle and polished bone pick into your satchel. It's strange to think how only weeks ago you'd never held a piece of birch bark between your teeth. Now the idea of brushing with plastic feels impersonal. The village stirs gently. People go about their routines and no one makes a big deal about your leaving, because in this place goodbyes are quiet. They're not endings, they're pauses. You walk slowly through the settlement one last time. retracing the rhythm of the habits you've adopted. There's the boy by the hearth, humming and flossing with sinew, his concentration absolute. The elder woman, sun-drying her cloth, wipes on a flat stone by the stream. The teenage girl carving the tip of her tooth-cleaning twig into a little spiral, not for function but for joy. And at the edge of the village, by the cliff path that overlooks the vast cold sea, the healer waits. You walk to her slowly, each step echoing your time here. She says nothing, just opens her hand. Inside is a single object, a small pouch made of softened leather, stitched with hair-thin thread. You know what's inside before she tells you. A traveling hygiene kit. Not ceremonial, not decorative, practical. You bow as you accept it, and she smiles not with words, but with teeth. Strong, worn, honest. Historians still argue whether such pouches were considered sacred, whether hygiene kits were status symbols or just necessities, whether the Vikings understood the full microbial benefit of their rituals, or simply followed tradition. But as you walk the path away from the village, that leather pouch swinging at your hip, you realize the answer doesn't matter. What matters is that they did it, day in, day out. Not because they had to, because it made them stronger, clearer, more present, more themselves. At the river's edge, where your boat waits to carry you back to your own time and world, you pause for one final act. You sit on a flat stone, pull a fresh twig from the pouch, and begin to chew. The wind is soft, the water laps like breathing, and you go through the ritual not because you're dirty, not because you're afraid, because this is how you mark the moment. Clean mouth, clear mind. You finish rinse with the cold river water and spit gently into the stream. It carries away the past like a blessing. As you climb aboard, you glance back only once. The village is quiet now, disappearing into the trees, but you carry it with you, in your fingers, in your breath, in your teeth, because now you understand oral hygiene was never just about the mouth. It was about identity, voice, presence, survival. It was about remembering the world doesn't just pass through your eyes or your ears, but through your words. And every word begins in the dark behind your teeth. You're out to sea now. The wind bites your cheeks and whips the wool hood tighter around your ears. But it's the salt that claims your attention. It clings to everything, your clothes, your lips, your eyelashes, and especially your teeth. You hadn't really considered it before, what salt air, salt spray, and salted food would do to the mouth of a Viking sailor. But now, bobbing in a longboat with 6 others and the endless sea in every direction, it's all you can think about. Salt dries the mouth, dries the gums, encourages cracking inflammation sores. And when all your provisions are salted, meats, dried fish, and hardtack ground with stone grit, your teeth work overtime. You glance at your shipmates. No one is complaining. No one ever does. But they're moving slower, their jaws working harder than usual, chewing thick strips of whale meat like it's shoe leather. And then, of course, they clean. One man pulls a pick from his belt and works between his molars with careful precision. Another unwraps a bundle of dried mint birch twigs and shares them around. You chew one instinctively, tasting the bitter antiseptic bite, and begin to understand how Viking sailors endured weeks at sea without modern dental supplies. Historians still argue whether salt-heavy diets hastened tooth loss in seafarers, or whether the balance of preserved meat and physical scraping was enough to stave off disaster. The truth is likely somewhere in between. But these men and women adapted. They rinsed with seawater. They scraped diligently. They packed poultices in their gums. Some skulls from Viking ship burials show extreme wear but minimal infection. It wasn't painless, but it was manageable. You learn to move with the sea's rhythm, and with it, the rhythm of care, eat, scrape, rinse, sleep. Over and over, the stars wheel above, the prow creaks, and somewhere behind the clouds, the moon watches a boat full of men chewing bark in silence. This is how you stay healthy. This is how you survive the sea. The boat docks in the gray morning light, its hull scraping gently against the pebbled shore. You jump down with the other's boots, sinking slightly into sea-damp earth. The harbor town is already stirring, sailors shouting, smoke lifting from chimney holes, dogs barking in that low, gravelly way that seems to match the chill. You walk slowly, taking in the bustle of the docks. Traders offloading crates, children weaving through crates of dried herring, and most surprisingly, a woman painting her face. At first it looks like typical war paint, dark pigment smeared around the eyes, across the cheekbones, even along the jawline. But then she bares her teeth, and they're black, not stained, painted. War paint, not tooth decay. You freeze, blinking. She grins at your expression, says something in a lilting tone you can't quite parse, then dips a finger into a small clay pot. With deliberate care, she smears the mixture along her lower gums and between each tooth. You're watching performance, not pathology. It turns out in some Viking circles, particularly among the more dramatic raiding parties, blackened teeth were used to intimidate, to look more fearsome. Paired with dark eye paint chainmail and a scream, it gave the illusion of a mouth cursed by demons. Historians are divided. Was this common fringe, a specific cultural subset? The truth is murky. A few skulls show residue near the gums. One or two sagas mention the iron-mouthed woman, but mostly it lives in rumor and reenactment. Still, the contrast fascinates you. You've just spent weeks learning about bark scrapes and sinew floss, about vinegar rinses and clove pastes, and yet here teeth are sometimes dirtied on purpose. The key, you realize, is intent. These warriors weren't letting their teeth rot. They were choosing how to present themselves. Clean by default, painted by design. It's cosmetic, like eyeliner, like armor. You try a bit yourself, just a swipe of soot-mixed oil, and instantly your reflection in the water looks otherworldly, fierce, not rotted, just transformed. You wipe it away. Beneath the black, your teeth feel clean, scrubbed from this morning's routine. Bark and charcoal, habit and respect. You leave the dock with a new truth. Even the Vikings, who smeared their mouths with shadow, still knew what lay underneath mattered most. You're back on land, traveling inland now, through thin forests and over rolling hills, the kind of landscape that blurs into quiet green and gray. The party you're with is headed toward a sacred site, a circle of stones said to mark the resting place of heroes. You've heard that some of these men fell in battle, while others were honored for something subtler, wisdom, healing, even speech. What you weren't expecting were the skulls. When you arrive, the scene is respectful, reverent. The stones form a loose ring, each one carved with symbols you can't quite read, worn smooth by wind and time. In the center is a low wooden platform covered in furs and oilskin. Laid upon it are remains, bones, yes, but particularly skulls. Not in display, in preservation. Each one tells a story. The first is massive, clearly once belonging to a large man. His jaw is thick, the molars worn down nearly flat. You count them all present. His front teeth, though chipped, remain. and lodged between two of them is a sliver of metal, bronze, jagged, a weapon fragment maybe, or a dental tool that cracked, or a toothpick-turned talisman. Another skull has a chunk missing from the mandible, exposing a healed abscess cavity. No infection remains, just bone that tried to grow back. Someone had dug the rot out and packed it maybe with honey, maybe with ash. It worked. You lean into another, this one smaller, the teeth still present but filed into shapes triangles, intentionally by the look of it, possibly ceremonial, possibly for fear or beauty. Historians still argue about these practices. Were Vikings modifying their teeth for identity, for tribal distinction, for the gods? Or were these battlefield signatures designed to strike fear in enemies? All you know is what you see, the evidence of lives that didn't just use teeth but made meaning from them. A guide steps forward with a long curved blade, not a sword, something closer to a chisel. Decapitations, someone whispers. You look again. Yes, some skulls show signs of clean removal necks, broken by blade, then buried whole. But here's the strange thing, many of them still have their teeth. That is uncommon. You think of battle, of blunt trauma, of hunger, of disease. And yet here lie rows of skulls with mouths that endured, that survived all of it. Why? Because they were cared for. Because even in death they were kept. Some cultures believe the soul escapes through the mouth, that the last breath carries you onward. If so, then the teeth that framed that breath mattered. And here among stones and silence, they still do. The next village greets you with voices before it greets you with faces, low, singing rhythmic thuds of mortar and pestle, the occasional bark of a dog. But what sets this place apart isn't the song or the food, or even the scent of drying fish. It's the women. Specifically, the women's teeth. You're invited to sit near the hearth, where they prepare herbs for winter lavender, sage, wild thyme. As the women work, they talk, laugh, chew, and every so often smile, and their teeth well-maintained, unblemished, strong. It's not luck. You quickly realize that oral care in this community isn't merely a byproduct of survival. It's a form of identity, a form of beauty. One woman, maybe in her late 30s, pulls a small mirror, polished bronze, from her pouch and uses it to inspect her molars, not with vanity, with precision. She cleans a bit of bark from between them using a tool that looks carved from antler. Another gently instructs her daughter, no more than 6, how to soften the end of a stick before brushing with it. The child follows her movements exactly, then proudly shows off her teeth. The room applauds. It's strange to think how much Viking women are overlooked in mainstream portrayals, either simplified as mothers or mythologized as shield maidens. But here in this simple longhouse, you see the real labor, the sustaining kind. Historians still argue about gender roles in hygiene, whether these rituals were female-led, shared, or individually learned. But what's undeniable is that women often held the herbal knowledge, the remedies, the blends that soothed and healed. And perhaps more than anyone else, Viking women understood the value of a healthy mouth, not just for eating but for influence. A woman with good teeth could speak clearly, sing with strength, whisper with confidence. Her smile could diffuse tension. Her laughter could seal bonds. Her voice could carry a story, a warning, a blessing. You watch one of them, older, gray-haired, a matriarch by stature, if not title, chew on a root with deliberate calm. When she speaks, people listen. When she points to her jaw and shakes her head, the room falls silent. She's talking about someone who didn't care for their teeth. The lesson lands. You ask if there were penalties for poor hygiene, shunning shame. The translator just smiles and says, no, only silence. Because in a culture where oral health equates to voice losing, your teeth means losing your power to shape the world. You leave with a pouch of herbs, a polished stick, and a new understanding. The mouth was never just a battlefield. It was also a throne. By now you've walked through villages and longhouses, sailed across sea and story, and chewed more birch bark than you ever thought possible. You've watched tools passed between generations and pain eased with poultices. You've seen skulls tell truths, textbooks forgot. But today, as you near the edge of the known world, a promontory that juts into the wind like a stone tongue, you come face to face with a deeper kind of argument. Not between people, between eras. You arrive at a gathering, not a feast, not a market, something different. The people are seated on low stones in a ring like a court, like a council. In the center, a speaker, young, sharp-eyed, holding a comb and a twig like props. She's speaking in Norse, but her gestures are enough. She's making a case, something about image, about truth. The translator whispers in your ear. She says, modern people think we were filthy, that we stank, that we let our teeth rot out while we howled like beasts. The speaker points to her own teeth, white, clean, strong. She speaks louder now, animated. The group murmurs in agreement. Some laugh bitterly. Others nod solemnly. Historians still argue whether the Vikings were more or less hygienic than their European neighbors. The bias runs deep. Christian chroniclers often describe Norsemen as uncouth, using dirt and decay as weapons of propaganda. But archaeological evidence tells a different story. Combs in every grave, toothpicks beside drinking horns, pouches of ash and mint buried with warriors. Even foreign accounts admit a begrudging respect. English nobles reportedly resented how well-groomed Viking invaders were, how often they bathed, how clean their nails, how white their teeth. The speaker finishes with a line that silences the wind. Clean teeth are not weakness, they are readiness. And there it is again, that Viking balance. Strength without shame, function and form, survival and pride. You watch as the crowd disperses, everyone carrying their cleaning tools like weapons or talismans. You turn to your translator and ask if this kind of argument happens often. He nods. It's not about the past, he says. It's about who gets to tell it. You walk away slowly, fingers brushing the smooth pick in your pouch. You think of movies you've seen, books you've read, all those yellow-fanged, greasy-haired caricatures, all those snarling, speechless monsters, and you realize those weren't just wrong, they were stolen. The real Vikings weren't afraid of mirrors. They made their own. The night before your return, the village gathers for one final meal under the stars. No fanfare, no ceremony, just warmth and quiet joy. Smoke curls up from the hearth, carrying the scent of roasting root vegetables, sea salt, and spiced mead. You sit among them, your fur cloak snug around your shoulders, your jaw slightly sore from the rhythm of bark and chewing sticks. But it's a good ache, the kind that reminds you that you've lived differently. You look around and take it in every small gesture, every familiar habit. One man rubs a mixture of ash and thyme along his gum line after the last bite of meat. A woman unwraps a string of mint leaves tied in thread and passes it to a child who tucks it behind her ear like a flower. A grandmother nods her approval as a boy chews on a willow twig and spits the fibers cleanly to the side. No one is performing. Everyone is living. You think back on every moment: the sailor with the abscess, the healer with her bone, picks the tooth on the stone in the grove. The sound of sinew floss sliding through molars in a longboat as the aurora shimmered above, and the speaker on the promontory defending her people's truth with bark and breath. And you understand now in your bones and in your teeth. This was never just a story about hygiene. It was about how people shape themselves through what they do, not just what they say. It was about how care can look like war paint or bark chewing or the silent act of pressing oil onto cracked gums. It was about how the smallest tools, a stick, a comb, a pick, carry entire cultures in their grooves. You chew one last piece of bark, not out of necessity, out of respect. And when you leave the next morning, the longhouse fading behind you, the sea wind pulling at your cloak, you carry something more than memory. You carry a voice sharpened by birch. You carry a truth they lived every day, that a clean mouth is not just a sign of health. It's a sign of readiness to live, speak, laugh, and lead. And now here you are again, still quiet, warm beneath your blanket, the flickering shadows of Viking fires far behind you, fading like mist. Breathe gently now. Feel the muscles in your jaw relax, the tension melting from your cheeks, your tongue resting quietly behind your teeth. You've come a long way tonight, across oceans of time, through longhouses filled with laughter and the earthy scent of mint and ash. You've sat with elders, learned from healers, and watched strangers tend to one another with the simplest, most human of rituals: care. Not grand, not loud, just steady, chewing, rinsing, scraping, sharing. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Let your breath fall into the rhythm they knew so well, the rhythm of living on purpose, of paying attention to what keeps you speaking, smiling strong. You don't need a bronze pick or a carved comb tonight. You only need the memory that you were part of something ancient, something tactile, something true. The fire is low now. The mead has been drunk. The night wind presses gently at the walls. You are clean. You are calm. You are enough. Let the Viking world drift behind you like a boat easing away from the shore. Let the sounds of scraping twigs and softly hummed sagas fade into a quiet that wraps around your shoulders like a woolen cloak. You are safe. You are still. You are exactly where you need to be. And somewhere in a longhouse far away, someone's chewing on a piece of bark, not for the world, just for themselves. Good night. End of script. Sweet dreams.